Good afternoon. My article over the weekend was called 2020 Opens with a Bang. It's been an extraordinary opening to the new decade, worthy of the best cinematic sequences ever. Something like the ride of the Valkyries helicopter scene in Francis Ford Coppola's 1978 classic Apocalypse Now. Nassim Nicholas Taleb referenced another Francis Ford Coppola classic, The Godfather. He tweeted there was perhaps no Soleimani threat, at least nothing new, and there was no need for it. Trump borrowed an old Persian trick, put the head of a horse in the enemy's bed. There is this formidable scene in The Godfather when a Hollywood executive wakes up with the bloody severed head of a horse in his bed, his cherished racehorse. He had refused to hire a Sicilian-American actor for reasons that appeared iniquitous, as while he knew of the latter was the best for the role, he was resentful of the olive oil voice that charmed one of his past mistresses and fearful of its powers to seduce future ones. It's been very cinematic and stream of consciousness in 2020. The shooting down of PS-752 out of the night sky a couple of nights before the luminous wolf moon coincided with this verbatim release about Boeing. This airplane is designed by clowns who in turn are supervised by monkeys, said one Boeing company pilot. Meanwhile, Trump tweets that he is going to bomb Iran's cultural sites one moment, and the next tweets in Farsi to the brave, long-suffering people of Iran, I've stood with you since the beginning of my presidency, and my administration will continue to stand with you. Federico Pieraccini writes in an article captioned "The Deeper Story Behind the Assassination of Soleimani." Iraqi Prime Minister Adil Abdul-Mahdi has revealed details of his interactions with Trump. He tried to explain several times on live television how Washington had been browbeating him and other Iraqi members of parliament to toe the American line, even threatening to engage in false flag sniper shootings of both protesters and security personnel in order to inflame the situation, recalling similar modi operandi seen in Cairo in 2009, Libya in 2011 and Maidan in 2014. This is why I visited China and signed an important agreement with them to undertake the construction instead. Upon my return, Trump called me to ask me to reject this agreement. When I refused, he threatened to unleash huge demonstrations against me that would end my premiership. Huge demonstrations against me duly materialized, and Trump called again to threaten that if I did not comply with his demands, then he would have Marine snipers on tall buildings target protesters and security personnel alike in order to pressure me. The Wall Street Journal gives credibility to that article because they reported the Trump administration warned Iraq that it risks losing access to a critical government bank account if Baghdad kicks out American forces following the US airstrike that killed a top Iranian general, according to Iraqi officials. The State Department warned that the US could shut down Iraq's access to the country's central bank account, held at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, a move that could jolt Iraq's already shaky economy, the officials said. Iraq, like other countries, maintains government accounts at the New York Fed as an important part of managing the country's finances, including revenue from oil sales. Loss of access to the accounts could restrict Iraq's use of that revenue, creating a cash crunch in Iraq's financial system and constricting a critical lubricant for the economy. The warning regarding the Iraqi central bank account was conveyed to Iraq's Prime Minister in a call on Wednesday, according to an official in his office, that also touched on the overall military, political and financial partnership between the two countries. The US Fed basically has a stranglehold on the entire Iraqi economy, said Shaban Taha, chairman of Iraqi investment bank Rabi Securities. The world is literally on fire. 2019 was Europe's warmest year, marginally higher than temperatures in 2014, 2015 and 2018. Global average temperatures in 2019 were 0.6 degrees Celsius warmer than the 1981 to 2010 average. 1 billion animals are dead in Australia. Joshua Keating tweeted Sussex plunged into anarchy as ruling family's departure leaves power vacuum. It's all very Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. There are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. In India, 250 million workers went on strike, and India cut its growth forecast to the slowest in 11 years. The World Bank, in its latest economic release, spoke of the fourth wave. Recent debt build-up in emerging and developing economies. There have been 4 waves of debt accumulation in the last 50 years. The latest wave, which started in 2010, has seen the largest, fastest, and most broad-based increase in debt among the 4. Total EMDE debt reached almost 170% of GDP in 2018, $55 trillion, an increase of 54 percentage points of GDP since 2010. The World Bank tried to keep it bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa regional growth is expected to pick up to 2.9% in 2020, but in the same sentence admitted the feeble economic recovery in Sub-Saharan Africa has lost momentum, with growth in 2019 estimated to have edged down to 2.4%. from 2.6% in 2018. Africa Confidential headlined their leader African Spring Economic Winter. The tension between the aspirations of Africa's overwhelmingly young 1.2 billion people and the continent's sluggish economic progress is palpable throughout the continent's 30 million square kilometers. In several countries, especially in the bigger economies such as Algeria, Nigeria and South Africa, where hopes are highest, the political temperature is close to boiling point. It will take quantities of political will not seen so far to respond to such pressures with a credible plan. I put it in a different way in my article of December 9, Time to Big Up the Dosage of Quaaludes. The market spiked gold to $1,600 an ounce before closing out last week at $1,561. We're now at $1,555. And given the uncertainty I've outlined, gold looks well underpinned and might even have a banner year. Brent crude spiked above $72 a barrel in the middle of the night, but then retreated to close out last week at just above $65. There is enough oil around, but there won't be if the Strait of Hormuz gets shuttered. US stocks continue to float higher on a tidal wave of nearly free money, just under $500 billion since September. Nigeria's stocks are the world's best performers this year. The Nigerian all-shares plus 9.51% in 2020. But I noted Mr. Dangote is using this bounce to hightail it to New York. Let's finish up in Kenya, where we are currently under a plague of locusts and Al-Shabaab attack. Margot Kiser wrote in the Daily Beast, "The Manda Bay attack is the first Al-Shabaab has carried out on a US military installation inside Kenya. Among the aircraft destroyed at the Manda Bay base were manned surveillance planes that collect data across the border in Somalia, as well as over Kenya's dense bony forest. Also reportedly destroyed were aircraft operated by US Special Operations Command and a modified Havilland Canada -8 spy aircraft, which carries the US Civil Registration Code N8200L. This is a mind-bending Jedi-level intrusion, an asymmetric coup de grace. The US Africa Command has sent its crack East Africa Response Force to secure the airfield and augment security. This is in fact a big deal." And the couple of few links I've put in: the explosion, the Tel volcano eruption at 25,000 feet taken by an AirAsia pilot, the apocalyptic scene from Australia's fire via RT.com, a link to the ride of the Valkyries in Apocalypse Now, the link for Taleb's tweet, "This is no Soleimani threat." There was no Soleimani threat, at least nothing new, and there was no need for it. Trump borrowed an old Persian trick, put the head of a horse in the enemy's bed. And then I put the link in for the Godfather, the preamble to the dead horse scene. Mr. Corleone is a man who insists on hearing bad news immediately. "I don't care how many Dago, Guinea, Wop, Greaseball, Goombas come out of the woodwork. I'm German-Irish. Well, let me tell you something, my Kraut Mick friend." The horsehead scene, the farcy tweet by Trump, but according to Charlie Robertson, Twitter's banned in Iran. A link to Federico Pieraccini's article, a link to the Wall Street Journal article about how the US warns Iraq it risks losing access to key bank account, a link to the price of Brent crude, and a link to the article by Margot Kiser in the Daily Beast, which I was referencing as well. Thank you for listening.